The year was 1969, and Chevrolet was lying to everyone. They handed you a brochure for a new Camaro that claimed a modest 290 horsepower, but the moment you turned the key, the ruse was over. What you were actually hearing wasn't the polite hum of a commuter car. It was the erratic, violent idle of a race engine that had accidentally escaped the track. This was the Z28 DZ302, a high-revving legal loophole that was arguably the most dangerous car Chevrolet ever parked in a showroom. If you weren't careful, this car would ruin your reputation before you even left the parking lot. Most people think they know the 1969 Z28, but they don't know the truth about why this specific year became a one-and-done masterpiece. We're diving into the secret engineering that made it a nightmare for casual drivers, the high-stakes Trans Am racing war that gave it life, and why the insurance companies eventually decided this car was a liability they couldn't ignore. Back in the late 60s, the muscle car wars were fought with brute force and massive displacement. But while the other guys were stuffing giant big blocks into everything with four wheels, Chevrolet was playing a much more tactical game. The Sports Car Club of America, the SCCA, had a strict rule for their Trans Am racing series. Engines couldn't exceed 305 cubic inches. Chevy wanted that trophy, but they didn't have a 5.0-liter engine that could survive a road course. So they went into the lab and performed some mechanical alchemy. They took a 327 cubic inch block and threw in a 283 cubic inch crankshaft. The result was a 302 cubic inch monster that didn't just run, it screamed. But here's where it gets interesting. Chevy didn't even put the Z28 in their main sales brochures at the start of the year. It was a secret RPO, regular production option, meant for the guys who knew which boxes to check at the dealership. In 67 and 68, the Z28 was almost a ghost. By 1969, the word was out, but the car hadn't become any more refined. It remained a surgical tool in a world of heavy sledgehammers. If you walked into a Chevy dealer in early 69 and asked for a Z28, a salesman who valued his commission might have tried to steer you toward a big block SS396 instead. He'd tell you it was smoother, easier to drive, and wouldn't stall at every red light. And he was right. The DZ302 was a nightmare for the uninitiated. It featured 11-to-1 compression, a radical solid lifter camshaft that clattered like a typewriter, and a massive Holley 800 CFM 4-barrel carburetor. That 290 horsepower rating? That was a complete myth created to keep insurance adjusters from panicking. On a real dyno, these things were actually pushing closer to 375 horsepower. But there was a trade-off. The DZ302 had zero low-end torque. If you tried to drive it like a normal person, shifting at low RPMs to run errands, the car would protest. It would bog down, foul its plugs, and leave you stranded while a 6-cylinder Nova passed you by. This was a car that demanded to be thrashed. You had to keep the needle between 4,000 and 7,500 RPM just to make it happy. For a suburban dad in stop-and-go traffic, it was a temperamental, overheating mess. It was a racehorse that hated being tied to a post. But for a street racer on Woodward Avenue, it was a giant killer that could embarrass any big block once the revs climbed. The 1969 model year gave the Camaro a completely new attitude. It was wider, flatter, and looked like it was moving even when it was standing still. It had those signature shark fin louvers and a cowl induction hood designed to gulp in cold air. Under that hood, the DZ302 was a work of art. Forged steel crank, forged rods, and impact extruded pistons. Everything was over-engineered to handle the stress of sustained 7,000 RPM shifts. The Z28 package wasn't just an engine, though. It forced you to take a 4-speed Muncie manual and power front disc brakes. You couldn't even order air conditioning. Why? Because the engine spun so fast, it would literally shred the AC compressor and send the drive belt into the next county. People often forget that the 69 Z28 was a stripped-down brawler. If you wanted power steering or a radio, you had to pay extra. Chevrolet's focus was entirely on the mechanical connection between the driver's right foot and the pavement. And that's when the men in suits started to get worried. The 1969 Z28 was winning on the track with drivers like Mark Donohue, but on the street it was gaining a reputation for being dangerous. It wasn't because the car was unstable, it actually handled better than almost anything else on the market, but because it encouraged the kind of driving that got people's licenses revoked. By late 1969, insurance companies had caught on to the 290 horsepower lie. Premiums skyrocketed, sometimes costing more per month than the actual car payment. The fun was being taxed out of existence. Then the world changed. The golden era hit a brick wall of reality. Between the looming oil crisis, new emissions laws, and the disappearing supply of high-octane leaded fuel, the writing was on the wall. That 11-to-1 compression engine needed purple gas to survive, and suddenly that was becoming hard to find. By 1970, the 302 was dead, replaced by the larger 350 cubic inch LT1. It was a solid engine, sure, but it lacked the high-pitched mechanical scream of the original 302. The 1969 Z28 was a lightning bolt in a bottle that was only allowed to exist for a brief, glorious window of time. If you're looking to buy a real numbers-matching 69 Z28 today, you'd better have a very deep wallet. We're seeing survivor cars fetch anywhere from $80,000 to $150,000 at auction. Collectors want them because they represent the absolute peak of the race car for the street philosophy. But here's the final twist. Despite its legendary status now, Chevrolet actually struggled to move these cars early in the year. They were so specialized and so finicky in traffic that many sat on dealer lots for months. It wasn't until the Z28 started dominating the Trans Am series that the public finally caught on. Even then, many owners ended up swapping the rear-end gears just so they could pull away from a stoplight without burning the clutch to a crisp. You might have heard stories about the cross-ram intake too. Most Z28s left the factory with a single carb, but you could order a dual-quad manifold that came in a box in the trunk for the dealer to install. It turned the car into a high-speed monster that didn't just want to go fast, it needed to go fast to stay alive. It was a beautiful, high-maintenance beast that was never meant for the quiet life, and yet it became the poster car for an entire generation of gearheads. The 1969 Z28 DZ302 wasn't built for your comfort or your gas mileage. It was built to rev until the valves screamed and to bring home trophies. It was a car that required a real driver, not just someone behind the wheel. It was a threat to your insurance rates, a challenge to your hearing, and a nightmare for any Mustang that made the mistake of lining up next to it. It was the last of the purebreds, a car that valued performance over everything else, including its own survival. When you see a 69 Z28 today, you're looking at more than just vintage steel. You're looking at the exact moment Chevrolet stopped being sensible and started being radical. It was a time when the sound of solid lifters at 7,000 RPM was the only music that mattered. It was the pinnacle of the pony car era. And frankly, we're never going to see anything like it again. If you had the keys to any car from 1969 right now, would it be the high-revving Z28 or a torque-heavy big block? Are you a Chevelle fan or maybe a Mopar guy at heart? Drop a comment below and let me know. I read every single one of them. And if you enjoyed this look back at the golden age of American muscle, hit that subscribe button. We've got plenty more stories coming your way. Thanks for watching, and keep those engines revving.